So first of all, I'm Mike Hulsizer, and I've been collecting Western New York memorabilia for quite a bit now. Um, and these are the lodges that I'm primarily focusing on. The term Western New York is obviously a little broader, but I'm primarily focusing on, you can see that the lodges, Ganasote, Tuscarora, Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee, and now Erie Canal. Incidentally, when I came into doing collecting, I was, thinking, oh, you'd see those Santa sort of, send 10 flaps. Of course, I was in 159. That was always one of those that was on the do not send list. So then I moved to St. Louis to 51. So I'm still on the do not send list. But now I think Erie Canal is one of those that people will take. So I'm going to go with this. I'm going to start off. You can see a little history on Ganasote Lodge. I'm also going to do some of the pre-OA sort of material that's out there and some of the patches on that because there is some stuff that predates the lodge itself. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. You're familiar, I just threw up an F4 up there. It's not a hard to get one of any sort. And when it comes to Ganasote, Tuscarora, and 159, there are some easier, these are three lodges that are not too difficult to collect by and large. But there are some pieces within that are a little tougher. So you can see here that Ganasote originally formed with Erie County Council. That lodge had an honor system that I'll talk about. It merged with Buffalo Council to form Buffalo area. They had their honor society as well. And some of those, you can see the Buffalo Council had Tribal Wakanda. I'll talk about that a little bit. And then, of course, we saw that the merger eventually happened with Tuscarora in 67. So what you'll see here are some of the pre-O society. These are pre-ordeal items that came out of Camp Hawaii. These were given out to scouts who had certain characteristics. They had a score sheet. I didn't put it up here, but there's a score sheet that was there. And the most difficult one is the blue one, which was about a fifth of the campers got. About 2/5 of the campers got the red one. And anybody who was over 65% of the voting, and these were voted on by their peers, they got the gold one. The gold one you tend to see more often. None of these you see a whole heck of a lot, though. And these were kind of given out, at Camp Hawaii, and these were primarily in the 1930s. So you'll see some of these popping around occasionally. And if anybody has questions, I don't have my chat open, but if you have those, I'll try to address those later on, or if I can see them. Tribal Wakanda was another pre-O sort of society group of sorts. In the Buffalo Council, they were operating, as you can see here, out of Camp Scout Haven. Here you can see a brochure from the 1930s. There's a few of these that you can get. And you can see there was several levels, if you will. So the wigwam was first, followed by the headache stick, as they called it. Lone Wolf. The Crimson Arrow is the one that most, and they had to achieve certain sort of skills in order to get these. The Crimson Arrow is the one that we tend to focus on more with this. The Tall Pine, you can see on this neckerchief several of those. I haven't seen any Flying Eagles, at least in this respect. And so this was active in the 30s. You can see some examples from some photos here. Here's a kind of a cool photo of Babe Ruth when he was hurt in 1925, meeting with a bunch of Buffalo area or Buffalo Council scouts. I circled, you can see the scout there with the Crimson Arrow on the uniform. Also over here, you can see a totem pole that they were working on, and going from bottom to top, it's the order that I just talked about: the wigwam, the headache stick, the Lone Wolf, the Crimson Arrow, the Pine, and the Eagle as well. And so those were going on for a while in the 1930s. This is all before Ganasote Lodge really came into being with that. Another one that you may have seen here and there is the Golden Bison. This kind of teamed up with what you've probably seen before is the belts, and those became popular during this time period in the 40s and 50s and into the 60s. The Golden Bison was sort of the original, kind of the beginning of that. The term Ton-Ca-Coo flexes quite a bit in Western New York, so you'll see that spelled a number of different ways. You see one spelling here, another spelling is Tonka. I've also seen Tonca, as I'll show you in a little bit. And it's not just this council, it's other councils as well. I have in Western New York have the legend of Ton-Ca-Coo. And of course, belt painting is something that's been around for quite a while in different areas of the country. The golden bison was earned, and there's some suggestions on some of these cards of how you advance. You can see some of the awards that are on the symbols that are then painted on the belts. And so that was active in the 1940s there in the Buffalo Council summer camp, primarily looking at Scout Haven. Also, there's some other honor society groups and trainings that you'll see around. Now, these are kind of tough to find sometimes. All these are to some degree because you don't really know what they are. They don't have a name on those. So the golden bison, of course, you'll see a bison. So unless you know what that's about, you don't really associate it very easily with Western New York. So they're kind of tough to sort of find on a search on eBay and things like that. These honor camper totems were present from the 1930s on upwards until you see here in the 1950s. These are large leather pieces that were created. They're probably like a 2x2, actually a little longer than that. And they had the names of the scouters on them for the honor group, and then these various patches. I'll go through these kind of quickly, and there's a bunch of them on there. And so what we see here is these are some of the, and these, by the way, these were called, this is the camp director one, and I added the senior patrol leader ones onto this slide as well. And these were present, like Hawaii into Scout Haven as the councils merged. And you can see the progression of these as you go through with the original flaps there on the left, and then progressing into the chain into the more silk screened on felt with the hangers. The blue ones are the ones that were for the camp director, and each troop had a camp director, which would be one of the adults who was in charge. And they were training them to be waterfront, for example, and what have you. The yellow ones were for senior patrol leaders. And that was kind of the camp director one, at least the blue ones. There wasn't I don't have an image, if you will, a cartoon for the other one. This cartoon, by the way, was one of the publications that was sent out at the time period. Quartermaster, you may have seen, you've probably seen some of these around if you collect in the area. And I've had, folks wonder what is that key for, and so this is the quartermaster one. You can see here the earlier one, the white and yellow, changed to more of a green and yellow, and then finally the silkscreen version of it on there. Here is the activities man one. You can see the progression of how that's gone during the time period from, your stitch done up to the silkscreen ones. And some of these were cut with belt loops or with buttonholes in them, and some were not. This one here is kind of tough to find because, how do you search for, basically it looks like a first aid cross. It's orange and blue. Not easy to find them if you're searching for them on eBay, because what exactly do you search for if you're looking for them in different areas? But they do come through. You can see the kind of the orange and blue theme to those. And that was your waterfront man. And then you'll see here the next one. Here we go. This one here is what's called Nature Man. And this was only for about a year or so they did this. And so if I were to go back up to that original image I showed you of the kind of 1950s piece, honors, this was not there. It was just the ones I just showed you prior to that. So this sort of dropped out of the mix at some point. So I've only seen this one here floating around that I was able to get. And so those are a bunch of those ones. So let's move into some of the Ganaso pieces. So these are all kind of your pre-OA that were mainly in the camps that were associated with Ganaso Lodge when it was either, as I mentioned, Erie or Buffalo. So a few of the more difficult, I'm not showing all the Ganaso pieces, so I'm just going to show you some of those that are the more difficult ones to find. So if you're looking around, this is some of the stuff that you might want to look into if you can snag. Caldwell pins are always tough, and this is one we just kind of discovered not too long ago. It was put out there on Patch, I think it was Patch Collectors on Facebook. Someone was asking about it, and all this was together. So the pin, and this is one of those generic pins, so it wasn't unique to Ganasote, but it was with, I believe it was issued, or it was something that folks purchased in Ganasote. It had the same looking, the side image of the Native American head is similar, of course, to the totem that was on the flap. It was with a Brotherhood sash, felt sash, and you can see the name of the individual. These were all packaged together, and they were handed on down from the family, so we know they're kind of together. The N1 is another early neckerchief that was put up by Ganasote. You've probably seen a lot of those yellow ones with the silk screened on them, of course, and of course the P ones, the triangle patches. This is an earlier version. I've only seen 2 of these so far. Not easy to find because they just got a G on them. So what do you know, is it a scout item? You know, it's hard to, unless you know what you're looking for, you're not really going to necessarily come to that. But the colors match nicely, and it's handmade, of course. And by the way, I want to mention I'm using new numbering system, so numbers will differ a little bit from what you may have seen. I've updated OA OA insignia, and I've updated patch vault. Although I noticed the Ganasote one isn't showing yet, but that one, Tuscarora and Ganasote are up, and I'm just about done with the Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee one, so those will go up as well. Here's you've all seen the F1 before. These are the 2 versions of the F1. I've collapsed these down a little bit, and I've taken the Blue Book suggestions and tried to use more MVE, multiple varieties, than some of all the different varieties that we come to A, B, and C's and what have you, that are difficult to understand unless you can see them next to each other. The differences on these, of course, you may see is the box that's around the green headdress area. And so if you're trying to figure out if you have an A or B for the F1 has a very rough looking face. And just for, these ones are not too hard to find, but I just want to show them just so you can see the distinction between the F1s that are up there. You'll notice the F1 has a very rough looking face. The F2, cleaner looking face, lighter brown, Lodge, Longhouse. And then you'll notice the key distinction is the braid on the hair. So you see a red braid on the F2. The F3 looks identical, with the exception being kind of a green hair braid and same face you saw at the F2. Honestly, the F3 probably came before the F2, but I don't have any good evidence on that other than continuity. You know, green hair braids for the F1, F3. The F2 is red, just like the F4, but I don't have enough evidence to sort of move those around like that, so I've kept them as is. The F1s are not too, or you know, you don't see a ton of them. The price of those are, you know, anywhere from 125 to 75 is what you'll find. They're almost never, and they're always limp, it seems like. So it's hard to find them that are nice and stiff that haven't been maybe manipulated to be stiff like that. Whereas the F2s and 3s, you know, obviously F4s you can find like that. Couple of chapters. There's some chapter neckerchiefs that you've probably seen for Ganasote that are not too difficult to get. Ellicott, Apache, and those ones aren't too difficult. The Apache, though, a couple of chapter items that are not easy to find. That the 2 armbands are ones that Paul Freitag have, and traded those to Bill Mulrennan. He's provided those images. And I recently picked up the neckerchief slide as well. Paul Freitag, for those of you who may know Paul, was an Apache chapter, and so some of those items came, you know, mainly from his chapter. Some of the other ones that are out there, like I said, Red Jacket, Ellicott, and there's also an Apache neckerchief, aren't too difficult to find. But these, I don't have the armbands, and I doubt I'll get them. There's probably only a couple of them floating around, but they're official issues as such, and they don't, once again, have the name of the chapter on them, so you're looking for something, you know, I just Google Ordeal Master. I'm going to find all kinds of stuff that don't match up to this. Tuscarora Lodge is Niagara Frontier Council, formed in 1944. I'm originally from Niagara Falls, New York, so you know I've always had a affinity for Tuscarora Lodge. I think it's one of them. Really like the look of it. The lodge was originally supposed to operate out of Camp Thunder Rock, Camp Moss, or the various troop camps in the area. If you're not familiar with those, not surprising because there's only one issue I could find of Camp Moss. There's one issue of Camp Thunder Rock, which was for a couple of years, and that was actually in Allegheny when Moss failed, and the troop camps in the area. And it wasn't until Stonehaven was developed that Tuscarora Lodge had a place to stay. And eventually, of course, it merged in '67. The only Prio society that I could find is, and this is a terrible image, but it's the only one that I got it years ago when a consignment piece came up that Roy Moore they were selling. It was a little too expensive for me. trying to get another image of it. So if anybody has one that they'd love to trade, or they have an image, I'd be happy to take it from you. Once again, you see a different spelling of Ton-Ca-Coo than you maybe seen before on some of these. Camp Moss. I don't have any paperwork at all. Love paperwork is so tough to find. It's one of our 1-minute pieces here, but I'd love to find something about what is Ton-Ca-Coo when it comes to Camp Moss. How does one earn that, or what that is? So I have no documentation on it, but it's tentatively something that's pre-order the arrow, if you will, in that sense, because it does predate that. A couple of the issues that you'll see here, kind of a little fun issue here. You're familiar with the WOB issue for Tuscarora on the right there, the blue one. You're probably, if you were unfortunate enough to do some trading with somebody, in the 1960s and what have you, sometimes, all that came out was a black and white image. And if you didn't read the description very well, you might be fooled into accepting the item in the middle as the actual R1. It's actually cut from the 1952 hangar piece. And so that was, the 52 ones aren't that easy to find. You find them occasionally. And, the R ones, I guess if you find the 52, you could cut it up yourself and there you go. But I didn't want to do that. But in any event, those float around there, and it's identical except for the color, as you can see there. So the colors differ a little bit, but, now if you ever see one, now you know. And this one didn't come from China. The other tough one from Tuscarora is the L1. And so that one there is a tough one simply because you doesn't got the name on it. So you have to kind of know what the totem is and kind of look around in the 50-cent box, the neckerchief box. Occasionally you may find it there. I didn't put the F1, 2, and 3 up there because you can find those. The F1 is about $100 or thereabouts. And obviously the F2 and F3 and S1s you can find on that. That's Tuscarora. Let's do Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee Lodge. Now with Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee Lodge, this is the common first flap. This is the S1. The S2 has the fleur-de-lis on it. I'm going to go through several of the unique issues that are in Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee, including a few of the chapter ones. There's several that are kind of bunched up that are kind of smaller runs that you might come into. The lodge was formed in '67, went from 14 down to 3 chapters eventually, and merged in 2023, June, to form Erie Canal Lodge, which I'll do a brief bit at the end. So the toughest piece with this was, of course, the P1, or the 4 smokestack neckerchief. That was a difficult piece. It wasn't produced, a whole lot of them were produced there. And you could pick one up, $450 at one point. eBay brought those prices down quite a bit, and so and actually just didn't see them, quite frankly, until eBay came out. And then now you can pick them up for $175 thereabouts for a nice clean white one. And some you also find some with the pie removed from the neckerchief. This, by the way, the arrow changed going the other way for the P2. It also gained eventually gained the fleur-de-lis for the P3, and then there's also a embroidered version of that. But the P1 is a nice neckerchief, and that's one of the top pieces for the lodge. A couple other ones that are interesting that are a little bit more recent to some extent. The conservation trail, I renumbered that the R2 when redoing the numbering on that for the new kind of blue book stuff. It was the I think it was the R1.5. It's a conservation trail piece. You see the 159 in there. I don't see a whole lot of those floating around. The S3 was from the 81 NOAC. That was a tough piece for a while, $100 or thereabouts. It's probably more in the 75-ish range there. It is, each one is kind of unique because of the way they were stitched. So there's multiple varieties in terms of just the stitching itself. So we generally just accept that as is. Some of these were also sewn onto hats, and so you may see a lot of the holes around them for your hats themselves. So getting a nice mint crispy one is not always the easiest. I didn't put out all the delegate versions of the NOACs because you can actually get a fair amount of those if you look long enough, and so I didn't do a lot of those. The one I did want to do is the 1998 white bordered one. This really annoyed the hell out of people because only 42 were produced. And so if you were one of those collectors at the time and it was, you just didn't get one, and unless you win. So it was one of those that you don't see a whole lot of them out there. I know several people still looking for one, someone's probably in some kid's, drawer or something like that. But I haven't seen one up on eBay and I don't know how long. So I couldn't even tell you how much you'd get for that one of those. But the black border is the delegate, or the Prater version. This is the delegate one. A few other ones on here. Now, I'm putting a bunch of these up here. I got 2 slides of these, and these are conclave issues. Now, what the lodge did was, for several years, at section conclave, they issued a lodge flap. I don't know why they started doing that. It seemed like a good idea at the time. But you see here in 2000, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they just ghosted the standard flap at the time. The blue one, by the way, has stitching that's supposed to change colors in the light. So it's kind of a neat one. And some of these match a theme, like the bullseye there and the skull and crossbones, and then the full ghost approach to that. And like I said, they would produce maybe 100, 150, 100 of these, depending on the year. So they're not always the easiest to find, and some people collect them that collect section material as well. And here you can see another page of that. By the way, the previous page ended in, what did I say that ended in 07. They then skipped a while, then they start again in 2014. This is this dark blue one. Then 16, 17. This one here is 2018. This one here is 2019, the middle. And then the last issue that the lodge actually produced before the merger was 2022. So that was the last one. And like I said, that was, once again, they just did these kind of, 150, 200, 100, thereabouts in those range for those. So those can be kind of hard to find. They tend to get snapped up. For those film on collectors, Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee has had a few of these issues to support council contingents. And most of those are pretty easy to get, but these two here were a little more difficult, I think, because they were part of a larger set. And it's like a large back patch, and they had a bunch of CSPs around it. On the bottom, typically was the lodge flap. And one of these, I think it's there's only like 80 or so produced of them. And actually, the 2018 one, I think, was actually just the fire hit that year, and so that was one that's a little tougher to get as well. So those are a couple of the film on issues that you find sometimes are a little tougher to find. A couple other ones that are here as well. These are sort of special issues that are tough. These are your, Scott Schmidt, home of the Northeast Region Chief. There's a gray border and a silver mylar border. And those ones, there's a twill left and a twill right. So if you're like me and you need to catch them all, I have 3 of the 4. I'm looking for one of the twills, and it seems like the one I don't need always comes up. And these aren't as easy to get, mainly because people who collect these type of region or national chiefs, they snap these up. But those are out there. The Next and Prism one, only about 80 of these were produced. And this last one, I really didn't think I would ever find one of these. This is the AeroCore one from 2008. Reason is because there was a house fire and most of them were destroyed. And so there was only a few of them that went out there with the participants. And then we had a few of them show up at one of our traderies about 2 years ago. Always a good reason to go to Western New York Tradery. You never know what you'll find. And a few of them came out there, and so I was real happy to get one of those. But they're not, as a result, though, because of that house fire, there's not a ton of them out there at all. I would estimate probably 40 or so of those that are out. But anyway, that was one of the more recent ones, 2008, but tough find there. I didn't put all the event patches, but I put these out there because they don't have a name on them. So, you see the James Bond one there, and it doesn't say 159. It doesn't say Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee. So unless you know what you're looking for, you don't know what it is. This one does say Camp Sholkoff, so it gives you a little hint as to what it is. This one here does say Buffalo, and that is a chicken wing. Um, cold chicken wing, unfortunately. So that gives it away. The one here in 2019 was celebrating the Apollo mission, but didn't have anything on it that indicated it was from the lodge. So cool patches, I like them. But if you're looking for stuff and trying to fill them in, they're a little hard to find because it's hard to. What are you going to search for? What are you going to look for? So ones to kind of keep in mind, keep an eye out on. So there are a couple of those. Most of the other ones all say either 159, something like that. Now I'm going to move into for Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee a couple of the chapter issues. Chapter issues are always tough. Some are easier than others, and some tend to float around more. They were produced over more years, or they did a large batch initially. I don't think the lodge kept as much oversight on these, at least initially, and so we're always still finding chapter issues. The chapter that's probably the most difficult to find that I don't see a whole lot floating around is Ellicott chapter. So Ellicott chapter issued a number of patches, and they were primarily for their ceremonial teams or to promote things like elections and camp promotions. So they were by far the most prolific as far as the number of patches or types of different patches. But in terms of them getting out there and people and seeing them around, you just don't. I mean, honestly, I've been collecting for, you know, shoot, 25, 30 years now, and I've only seen some of these once. Um, so you'll see a couple of those also don't have great markings on them. So ceremonial team Ellicott, so you'd have to pick up that this is Ellicott chapter. This one does say 159 on it, so that gives you a little hint there. This one I think, is pretty kind of cool looking, but it doesn't give you any indication that it's from the chapter or the lodge. And we've gotten these all confirmed, so they're all definitely that. Then you see a few more with the Ellicott chapter, the WWs on there, etc. Cool looking patches, and they were put out to kind of promote youth involvement. You can see the next one too here. A couple of varieties on this is the somewhat happy, and this is the really not so happy elections team. Elections went well, didn't go so well, apparently. Here you see a smaller jacket patch that was done for an event. And this one here, that's supposed to be 1971 dash. I think it's supposed to be dash. I must have did that one wrong. It's supposed to be just one. And this is a 1974 piece as well. So a couple of those that are floating out there that you'll run into if you're looking for these, not easiest to find. For Ellicott chapter, if you go down a little further, we look at Niagara chapter has a couple of tougher pieces out there. They have some really nicely done patches that were designed by Harry DeBan, who passed a few months back. Harry was great job designing, and you can see the image here is this neckerchief, which is embroidered. That's one you don't see a whole lot, which is the same patch that you can find a little more commonly, but the neckerchief you don't see as much. And these were a couple of event pieces that were like JLT. I got one of those myself, so that's how I have one. And the other one, I'm still looking, I think, for the red one. I think it is. But a couple of chapter pieces if you're someone like myself who collects everything. A couple of older portage pieces that you don't see a whole lot, and these were from the early. Remember when I mentioned that when the lodges formed, there was 14 chapters, and they went down to 12 chapters. So these portage pieces were eventually discontinued. That chapter was, and so here are a few of the early ones that were done, and they're mainly trainings that you see here. But you can see typically put the red arrow through those, and we've confirmed that those are in fact Order the Arrow events run by the OA. And here you see a nice kind of leather neckerchief slide that you'll see. Once again, a good reason to go through those bins that you may see out. Last chapter piece I have is a steel one. This is actually Dave Zazowski's patch. Dave passed this past summer, unfortunately, and he was in steel chapter, and it's the only patch they put out, and it's the only one I've seen. So there's probably some more out there somewhere, but once again, it's one of those that's not really well defined. It just says steel chapter. You don't know where it's from or necessarily what it is. So I imagine there's some floating out there. I need one, but tough to find if you don't see all the markings on it. So that's the Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee stuff as far as the tougher pieces to find. I'm going to move on to the Erie Erie Canal Lodge. This is a new one, not relatively, it's new, although going away pretty soon. This is the S2. So this is in June, of course, we merged with 159 and 339 merged. And on November 1st, and so it's been around a little bit more than a year. And as Jerry mentioned, December 15th will be the new lodge. So I guess that's a year and a half or thereabouts. And so there was a merger that just happened. Erie Canal Lodge, this is the S2. And I have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking the number is about 300, 350 or so of this patch that was put out. I put that on there just as a showcase initially. The tougher pieces are these two right here. Although tougher is kind of relative because the S1 that you see there, it's got the established of 2023. There were two orders of that was put in. One was done in August and one was done in November or October, I think it was, or November. And there was about 300 or so of each of those. So, I've seen some of the prices of these. They've been going for quite a bit, but in reality, there's actually more of these than there are the S2. So I think, I know a lot of folks, S1, first flap collectors, I get that. But if you sit back and wait a while, you're going to see probably a few more of those S1s come out. And this one over here, kind of cool design. I was at NOAC, and there's a black border and a gold border, one of these. And it's not Mickey Mouse, of course, but the Steamboat Willie, there was a number of lodges that kind of jumped on that. And, to me, actually, for Erie Canal, it made a heck of a lot of sense, for a steamboat, so to speak. And so the lodge did a nice job with that. And they limited the delegate one to 50. And so there's not a whole lot of those floating around. There was a few that were for sale initially, went for higher prices. I know one was actually given to National so they could auction it off to go into the OA or to the Aero Fund. You'll probably see a few more of these come out, but they're not easy to find. So those are the two from Erie Canal that are probably the most difficult. And I'm looking forward to seeing if we get another patch from Erie Canal. There's another one after this, which was a section piece, which I didn't put on there. That one's a little bit easier to get. So I hope I didn't talk too fast. I wanted to leave time for questions and stuff. I want to give my thank yous out to Paul Freitag. Paul was, some of you may know Paul. He was a longtime scouter. He encouraged me to do something crazy, I thought, which is develop a history of it. So I did back in, published my first book, so to speak, 2001. And I've been updating it throughout then, although my website is down, it looks like, the website I put it on. Marty Abramson, who's on the call here, really inspired me to collect. I think my wife curses him every time I buy patches. No, I'm kidding. And then along the way, lots of help from lots of people. Some are still with us today, and some are not. And so it's one of those. Western New York Traders Group is a wonderful group, and they've done a lot to keep this all going.
Erie Canal is probably going to be ending the 2024 year with 330 members.
Oh, okay.
Once we merge with Ton-Ca-Coo Lodge 30, we will probably be starting the year around 450, 460 members.
Yeah, and when and of course when Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee was up and going, in the 1980s and 90s and 70s and 90s, there was quite a number of folks within that. That's for sure.
Yeah, Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee was up over 1,300 in the early 2000s. Roger Lemke loved patches, so that's why there are so many patches from Ho-De-No-Sau-Nee in that time frame. But as time goes, everything gets smaller and bigger in different ways. So the new lodge will be consisting of around 15 counties in 2 states.
Eric wanted to know if you had written any books, and what were they?
So I put together sort of and like I said, my website's down, but it looks kind of like this here, or let me put it back like this.
Pull it back in front of your face.
Pull it back
in front of your face. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
So it's just my lodge, and it's all these are print, and I would it was available online for download. So everything I talked about is available for download once the site works again. And it's through my university that I work at. So I'm wondering if they just do some budget cuts and didn't tell me. So I got to figure that out. But if anybody, it's about a year old, so I'm actually updating it based on the new sort of kind of blue book suggestions. So I've renumbered. You probably see a little bit of renumbering in Ganasot, because Ganasot is just a bear to sort of, is it an F1 or 2 or 3, and the different variations on the neckerchief. So I've kind of made it so you could literally look at it and figure out what it is without having 10 present in front of you and figuring out the color variations. So I'll have that ready pretty soon on that. And I'm working on Patch Vault and OA insignia as well.